Hey everybody, my name is Joshua Fakir, and it's time to take a timeout. Now, for this week's midweek motivation, I'm titling today's timeout, What Do You Believe? What do you believe? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I was thinking about just a couple of years ago when my wife and I, we purchased our first home. You know, we were first-time home buyers and we were new to the process. So we, in our minds, were thinking we have to gather as much information as we can to understand this process. I mean, the first-time home buyers class, we were so diligent. We took that class about 3 times just to capture as much notes as possible. We began to talking to different professionals, different people who was in the area of real estate and just, picking people's minds. And what we found was that can be a very dangerous thing to do. Because you see, along with the facts, you're also opening up yourself to people's opinions. You see, some people will give you advice based on what they know and can back it up with facts. And some people will just give you advice based on what they know and back it up with their experiences. Now, everybody's experience is not the same. Everybody's situation is different. But what you find is that there's people who would try to project their limitations on you. They would project their experiences on you. Some people, they may mean well, but some advice you can just do without. So we began to get advice and open ourselves up, and everybody started saying either something that was like really great and positive and have us on an emotional high, and then there's some people who come and just give you the worst of news, the worst of experiences, the worst of expectations, and it'll bring you very down. I mean, it's discouraging, and it's kind of like an emotional roller coaster. You're starting the process, you're trying to understand the process, but then in the midst of that, you're also getting some information that's going to help you and some that's going to deter you. And so it was very discouraging. And I remember this one particular time, we were actually coming out of our first-time homebuyers class. It was a whole Saturday from like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was midday, and they said, okay, we're going to take a break. So we decided on the break, we're going to mingle and ask a question. And this one person we spoke to, they just had, it was just the most negative perspective on life. But this was someone who was in a place you would think to be able to give you certain advice. It was one of the speakers that were there who spoke about the home buying process. And so they began telling us, what we can do, what you can't do, what's possible, what's impossible. If you say, this is what we're trying to do, no, that's not, that you guys won't be able to do that. It's not gonna work. If you guys won't, just shutting it down, not even understanding the situation. And because we thought this was someone who was in the position to help us, it's like, wow, well, this person obviously know more than we do. And so based on their knowledge, based on their advice, based on their perspective, that it began to temper our expectations. See, you only depend on what other people believe about your situation, it can temper your expectation. And so I remember we got in the car and we went to go get lunch in the time we had left. And I remember looking over at my wife, and she had just the most discouraged look on her face. She didn't even want to eat anything, even though we would have to go back for another 4 to 5 hours. And we sat there and we looked at each other and we had to ask ourselves this question: what do you believe? What do you believe? We spent all this time, all this process, just trying to figure out what other people believe, and we never stopped to ask ourselves, what do we believe about this process? And it was in that moment when we began talking, and then we began to understand, iron sharpens iron. We began to speak life into ourselves and say, you know what? This is our process. We're going to make it go the way we expect it to go. And if it works out, it does. If it doesn't, then it's not based on what someone believed for us. It was what we believed and found out to be the truth. And so that's a question we have to ask yourself, because what's interesting? When we decided on what we believed, we went after it, and everything the person told us what was impossible for us, we are able to achieve it and more. And so that's something that you have to ask yourself from time to time. What do you believe about your situation? It can't always be what someone else believes about it or what someone else believes for you. Ask yourself, what do you believe? You have to ask yourself, what do I think is possible? What do I think is attainable? What do I think is achievable? And if you believe you can do it, then trust me, then you can do it. Bishop T.D. Jakes says, if you only base your decision on empirical data, then you will only be able to accomplish what someone else has already achieved. It's good to take into history into account and data into the account, But you have to also understand that it is okay to believe for the impossible. It is okay to go for the stars. I once heard a quote by a man named James Cameron who said, if you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will still fail above everyone else's success. It's okay to dream big. It's okay to want to achieve the impossible. There's nothing wrong with that. You see, because why this is important to ask yourself, what do I believe? What do you believe? It's because your belief starts the process. It's based on what you believe that will influence your decision. And it's what you decide to do is what will influence your actions. You see, your actions is only a result of your decisions, but your decisions is a result on what you believe. It's important to understand that you're believing what you choose to believe. And I'm not saying to ignore facts. I'm not saying to ignore data. You take all that into account. But at the end of the day, if you decide that you're going to go after something or not go after something, let it be based on what you believe about the situation and not what other believes for you. You know, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, it says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So whatever you believe about yourself, that's who you will be. Another one says, above all else, guard your heart. From out of it flows everything you do. Another way they put it is, above all else, guard your heart. It determines your course in life. You see, what you believe in your heart, that's what you will pursue. So you got to look into your heart and say, you know what? I understand what everyone else is saying, but what do I believe about this? So as I said, first comes the belief, then comes the decision, and then comes the action. I heard a great man say that you, in your life, you have to make quality decisions because those are the only decisions that you live by. What is a quality decision? A quality decision is one in where there's no retreat. You have to make quality decisions in life, and it's all based on what you believe. Decisions are so important because whatever you don't decide, it will be decided for you. Your decision is probably one of the most powerful tools that you have. Rosa Parks say if there's anything she's learned through the years, is that once a decision is made, that's when it begins to diminish fear. You see, fear is one of the things that can influence and contaminate your belief. I heard that fear tolerated is faith contaminated. I was sitting down one day and I was writing something, and I went back and read it today, and I was like, man, this is powerful. And what I wrote was that once you come to an understanding that fear is not going to go anywhere, but then you also make a decision that you're not either, then the tables begin to turn. Because now you no longer have to deal with fear. Now fear has to deal with you. And so you have to come to a decision where nothing is going to influence what you believe except what you allow. Something that my wife said, and I wrote it down because it really resonated with me. And one thing my wife said, she says, it starts as soon as you begin. What is it? The process. The process starts as soon as you begin. Begin to do what? Begin to decide what you believe. Begin to decide what decisions you're going to make based off of what you choose to believe and based on what actions are going to follow those decisions. It starts as soon as you begin. As soon as you start to do the process, as soon as you start the process, everything else begins to fall in place. The moment we decided what we believed and what we were going to go for, when we were picking our house and going for our house, all of a sudden the process began to roll because we were no longer dealing with the whole analysis paralysis. We decided this is what we're going to go for, and we began to put one foot in front of the other, and sure enough, we found ourselves closing on our first home. And we got what we wanted because we had to ask ourselves and settle within ourselves, what do we believe? Whatever that amount of money they say you can't make, whatever that dream that they say you can't achieve, whatever goal that they say you'll never accomplish, whatever it is, I'm going to end it by asking you this question right here. What do you believe? So again, I want to thank you for joining me on today's Time Out. My name is Joshua Fakir, and I want you to acknowledge what you believe and decide that it will be achieved, and don't stop until it's retrieved. God bless you, and I'll see you in our next Time Out.
Deeper the fear, the greater the win. If you let the Savior come near and purify from within, gotta let the blessings begin. Take it from the top to the bottom. Satan will never win your heart. Use the gospel to stop him. Like a message in a bottle, God's waiting for you to find him. It's the reason to make it if you're following the Father. Through all of the suffering and no love from the government. But I will never let this flesh and bone